Okay, it's time to start. I think everyone is here. A great panel. Well, we are in this panel discussion focused on innovative solution regarding loss and damage with political acceptable solutions, with toolkits, and also with more money for impact finance. So with me I have Francesco. Don't need more presentation of you, I think. And then we also have Ida Naku from Uganda, climate activist, and Jing Wang, and Jesse Scott from as an expert on global practitioner in strategy and policy on climate change. And we also have with us from the private capital side and the insurance company, Martin Powell, Sustainability Director at AXA Insurance. And we have also Vida Devan from India as General Director General for the Energy and Resource Institute. And then also Andrea Ribeiro Hoffman from Associated Professor at the Institute of International Relations in Rio de Janeiro. So pretty big and knowledgeable panelists. So we'll see how we can run this through. So, and my name is Kai Embren. I've been working in the field of sustainability, leadership, and climate change for more than 30 years. And today I focus on my podcast, Transformers, at kaiembren.org, where you have 50 programs where you can follow some of this that we are discussing just now. And then I will start this discussion a little bit on the other end than the loss and damage. The side who created the loss and damage, which we need to have in the whole scope of discussion. And that is the fossil fuel who give us more costs. And I would like to start to ask Ida, a climate activist in Uganda, and how do you see the relationship to fossil fuel and loss and damage based on your country is focusing to support both pipelines and fossil fuel exploration? That means it also demands more resources to the loss and damage. How do you see as a climate activist on this issue?
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with all these experts, and I'm so glad I'm coming first because it's hard to come after experts. Anyway, so as a climate advocate, I think many of you have heard of the East African crude oil pipeline. So you've definitely maybe seen me in one of the videos or pictures protesting against it. So if it's how I feel against that pipeline, that's how I feel about it. But to bring it back to the context of loss and damage and fossil fuels. So with the East African crude oil pipeline, first of all, it's going to run from, why I'm saying it's going to run, because they've been postponing the construction because of protests from people like me. Banks and insurance companies have been pulling out from the funding of this pipeline. There was a promise to start the construction in the first quarter, but now the expense has increased to 55 billion, and many people, the financiers, have now pulled out of this, the construction, funding the construction of this pipeline. So before even the pipeline was constructed to run from Kingfisher to Port Tanga in Tanzania, just the route it was going to run, many people were displaced with no compensation. So that was the first loss people had. These were grounds that people had their burial sites. Some of them, this is all the land that they knew since they were little. So there was already that loss before even the effect of a fossil fuel pipeline being constructed. Then we have like the major like rivers and lakes, like the Lake Victoria, which is very essential for the East African community. It's shared in the border of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. It's a source for income for many farmers. It's a source of food for many families. So that, us protesting against the East African crude oil pipeline, it's going to bring irreversible damage. We've seen, like in the Niger Delta, oil spills no one is taking responsibility to kind of take care of these oil spills. So us protesting against that pipeline meant that we had already seen that these are some of the things that were going to take place if this pipeline was constructed. Then the pipeline itself is going to have over monthly 34.7 million tons of carbon into the atmosphere. And that's not taking into account the 2050 timeline of this is when the oil will get done. So if you calculate what's the amount of carbon that has been added into the environment. And to put the cherry on top, the major investor is a French company, Total, owning 50% of this oil, and Tanzania and Uganda only just owning 15% of the profit. Yeah. So if they're talking about things like, we're going to give you jobs, but the profit is already little, yet we have the source of the oil in our country. Yes. So that was just a little context on the eco.
Thanks. This is a big issue, but I would like to sort of include that in the discussion of loss and damage, because on the other hand, and what it create more pressure on the loss and damage funds for the future. And maybe ask the audience here, if you raise your hand, should we put more pressure on the fossil fuel industry? Raise your hand if you think so. Oh, yeah. We don't have time to go into it, but it's good to have a view of it and how we should do that. But to remind ourselves, of course, all the figures of the cost of loss and damage, and I think when we look at US, and because it's in the media every day, and I think it was in 1980s, annual cost for damage was 1 billion. Yeah. And when we look today and look at the cost of the fires in California, with about 16.5 billion 2018, and disappearing 18,000 houses. And of course that reflects on the cost of this. Can we afford this and for the future? And when I look at the cost of loss and damage for the 2023 and 2024, we look at Pakistan, 30 billion, Africa, 35 billion annually, China, 17 billion the 6 first months to 2024, and Latin America, Caribbean, the small islands, 20 billion 2023, and then the estimation of the loss and damage fund is about 580 billion 2030. And then we look how much money is it in the fund, and it's so far 700 million. So it's a gap here that need to be filled in. And it's also that some of this money is only pledged, and then we have the bureaucratic tendency and how efficient the fund is working. So it is some problem here that have to be solved. And of course we have the private capital side of this, the insurance company, and the premium for many households in US going up. I think I saw some figures of from $4,000 per year to $400,000 per year. And of course, these are real situations. And how do we solve this? And my question, going to Francesco first, with his proposal about the next generation planet, NGP, will that solve this? Why did you come up with this idea? And how do you want it to work? And I think the panel should be comment after your first brief.
Yeah, Jackie, you will also help me on explaining the proposal.
Yes.
Well, let me say first of all that it's vital, I think, for the Dolomite conference and for us all to also put forward some bold idea, no? Some proposal. This is the entire objective of the exercise. On loss and damage, we Vision dared to make a humble proposal, and I'm very happy that this session and the Dolomite conference in general is putting together what is called, with two horrible words which do not mean anything to me, the West and the Global South. I mean, I do not like these two words, both of them, also because it's not very clear. Well, China cannot be the West, but probably it's not the Global South. But yes, I really think that it's we are very much interested to hear from Martin, of course, from the insurance industry, but also from smart people who are coming from Brazil, from India, and from Uganda, and also, of course, from Europe, feedbacking to this idea. So, very quickly, the idea is, well, we call it the European proposal, to move past the loss and damage. And we call it the next generation planet because we sort of echoed the next generation EU, which was the big, well, it was quite big proposal package that the EU established in May 2020 when we were all locked down from the COVID-19 pandemic. Basically, the next generation EU, which then has got some problems, but the initial intuition of two people, basically, Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, that by the way, I miss a lot, Angela, quite honestly. The idea was to basically have a moment of solidarity, which was also a disruption in the way Europe works, so that every country was meant to contribute to this facility called the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and every country was sort of covered by this facility in relation to the damage coming from a COVID-19 pandemic. So basically, the basic idea is to have something that echoing the socialist motto from everybody in relationship with her financial capability to everybody in relation to her needs. So, first of all, the donors. Who would be the donors of this facility, Jing?
Okay, so for the donors, compared to the loss and damage fund from COPE, because in that fund, we divide the world into the global south and global north, but it hasn't given the very clear definition on who should pay to whom and how much is it and to which kind of project we should invest in. So in the next generation planet, our proposal is that the donors would be every member country, and the amount is calculated with a very simple formula. In this formula, we take into account the share of a country's GDP in the world and the share of the country's current emission in the world and the share of the country's accumulated emission in the history. Give you a very simple example. If we take the time period from 1750 to 2022, because as the accumulated emission data, because 1750 is more or less the time of the first industrial revolution, and we consider the data 2022 as the country's GDP and the country's current emission. The percentage that Germany will contribute to this facility is around 3.4%, and the whole Africa the percentage is around 3.3%. So it also contributes to the fairness issue between the climate change and economic development, but it conveys a very important idea that we humankind are standing together, not divided into two parts to combat the climate change.
Yeah, quickly to finish the proposal. No, the other important part is what we define by loss and damage here. We basically, and the role of the so-called the public money. So, and here it's where the insurance companies come into play, because the idea is that this facility would put just enough money in, by the way, both adaptation and co-finance the insurance, so that the insurance companies will consider again to insure part of the world that they are not insuring any longer, because it's outside market, which, by the way, means both probably Lagos, but also Tampa in Florida, which was just hit by hurricane, whose cost was estimated to be by Joe Biden around 50 billion US dollar, just that kind of hurricane.
Yeah, well, let's see, because we are here with the private capital and the insurance markets representative, and we have government representative, and it's a mix of contributor to be within this discussion. But how is it when we look at the insurance company like yours, Martin? How do you see this proposal in relationship to the crisis?
Okay, so thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm the Group Sustainability Director for AXA. I used to be the Deputy Mayor of London. It's relevant to a story I'm going to tell in a moment. For Boris Johnson, I didn't vote for him, so I just want to stress, nor for the party, nor for Brexit, actually. So let me just, to pick up Francesco's point, actually both of you said it very well, that the loss and damage fund, it's very vague in what it's trying to do, and there's clearly not enough money, right? I'll just read an extract of some of the things it's supposed to cover. Flood, loss of revenue from crops due to drought, heat waves, desertification, forest fires, crop failures, human and animal life, species, territories, water sources, ecosystems, livelihoods, heritage sites. It's a really big list. It lacks really practical solutions. Now, the question is, does it pay for building a barrier to protect against flooding? And I hope not, because actually private money can do that, and I'll explain that in a moment. Or does it pay for the economic damage caused by the flood that you couldn't prevent? And I would say this is probably a far better way for the money to be spent. The Thames Barrier in London, so I know this very well, it's been up and running for 40 plus years. And it stops big parts of London being flooded. They did a calculation that had they not built the Thames barrier, that the cost of the flooding that would have happened would be 25 times the cost of what it did to build the barrier in the first place. So the business case for building this was so clear that the ability to raise capital on such a return is very easy if you calculate those externalities into the original design, which in London's case they did, but there are many other flood-prone cities in the world that didn't do it. Your proposal, I just want to comment on that because I very much like the idea of allocating funds to places that are uninsurable. In the end, if you don't, then more people leave. The economic situation in that whole area just goes downwards, and you ended up with just big stranded areas, big stranded places that you can do nothing with. So to just cover the insurance gap is very achievable with a very, very small amount of funds. Let the investors come in and build the long-term infrastructure. Let the insurance industry reduce the risk and identify how to do that. And then you can bring in impact funds to focus on putting capital in. I have to say, society is terrible at building these business cases. I don't know why we're so bad. We should be better. So I value the paper you've written because it's very good. And then final comment I just want to make, two products that we do, and I'm not pushing us as a company, I just want to make an example. In extreme heat in Hong Kong, we now offer a parametric insurance solution, which means the workers are paid not to work. So if the extreme heat is consecutive 2 days, the workers get a payout, the payment is made, and they can then stop working. And it sounds like why on earth are we doing this? And I just want to make the point that the frequency of extreme weather events, the extreme heat that we're seeing across the planet, it's unprecedented. It's doubling, tripling the cost of insurance over the world. It's tripling the cost in specific zones for specific reasons. It's putting businesses out of business because they can't recover from one storm event, let alone two. So what we're seeing now is the need to act in the moment. And so also this loss and damage fund needs to look at the ability to get people and communities back on their feet to really recover them. And the second example I'll give, because this fund does look at nature, but we also offer this for the biggest coral reef in the world, the Mesoamerican reef. In the event of a storm, the reef gets covered with silt, and what happens then is the sea life disappears. If you don't remove the silt within 2 days, the sea life never returns. And I can tell you that coral reefs house 90% of the ocean's sea life. And we won't have a healthy ocean without retaining this healthy ocean. The parametric insurance is triggered, clears the silt, the sea life returns. 12,000 fishermen rely on this reef for their livelihoods. So this isn't just about nature. This isn't just about, keeping something beautiful for tourists to come and visit. This is about protecting a community that in the past didn't need that level of protection, and now we need to do it. So I'm a big fan, sorry, big conclusion, but I'm a big fan that we use small amounts of money to make something insurable. We identify the risk at hand and the risk in the moment, and then we use the private capital to come in and put in the big long-term solutions that we need.
Yeah, well, interesting comment, and you have the positive examples on that. But we also have bad examples when we look at the Philippines and Jamaica. They were under what they signed up for, so they didn't get anything from the insurance. And it must be some sort of a problem within this type of methodology that have to secure the cost to handle this type of crisis. What is your comments to that type of failure on the Jamaica and Philippines?
I mean, the complexities around putting parametric insurance in place are significant. In the end, you need somebody who's willing to fund those costs, and those people are the ones that are going to lose something if they don't. And so identifying the beneficiaries and the funders and understanding how they can play together is the key. The problem for the finance industry is this isn't particularly scalable. So we cover one coral reef globally, and it upsets me horribly why our business can't, there are thousands of coral reefs across the world. So why can't we replicate this everywhere? That's the key question you're asking, is how do you identify those that are going to lose something? How do you calculate that? And then how do you find the local funders that are going to make it work? But it's very achievable. I mean, we're doing it. The question is are we doing it fast enough?
Well, let's go to the other partners here around in the panel and see their comments on to take an initiative like Francesco and Jengai describe here. And start with Andrea.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Before going to the comments about the proposal itself, I'd just like to make a comment about the fossil fuels, since you started with that. And I think that it is also to incorporate it in the discussion that in several countries, of course, there is a medium and long-term issue in terms of changing their domestic models of development, and not only energy consumption, but that obviously, I mean, and thinking here on the case of Brazil, for instance, which has under the current government a very aggressive, in the positive sense, policy towards climate change and to undo some of the damages from the previous government. At the same time, there's a very strong, well, I would say, domestic interests and perception of short-term losses if it doesn't, if it cuts too fast on the fossil fuels production. And I think in the case of Brazil is a bit of this paradox that some countries, they have both. And not because the governments don't have the clear set of priorities, but because politics, and that's that I wanted to bring it, politics is a complex issue, and countries are not, which are not obviously totalitarian, they face those demands and those pressure groups. So the question here is exactly, just to put that on the table, that some countries, they face that struggle domestically. And I think I agree completely with you. We have those sorts of protests right now in Brazil because it's a contradiction, a country who wants to invest a lot, especially in light of COP30, but it's going forward with a fossil production in the end of the Amazon River, and that's a very specific one with a lot of protesters at the moment. But just to put on the table. Should I?
Yeah, okay. So we can be coming back to you. That's great. And yes, you have also been looking at different types of stakeholders relationship and also strategies and policy making. And what is your view of the next generation planet, and who is going to manage it to make it successful and efficient?
Well, this is part of course, many interlinked issues of fairness and justice in the climate problem. I think you can make the argument that it's one of the most urgent parts, because if people see help to deal with crisis, there will be more credibility to the debate about mitigation. And at the moment, I think we are fighting all over the world a discussion for different political reasons about the costs of mitigation. Some of the politics of that is going to change with extreme events, but help for dealing with extreme events will certainly support the overall politics. A couple of quick comments. In terms of scale of problem, if I've got my numbers right, about 65% of urban development in Southeast Asia is in known floodplains. Whose risk is that? is that a risk that's been taken by those who permit those sites? Is it a risk those who manage those sites, who build flood barriers or who don't? Or is it a risk for those who manage the crisis when the sites exist and the barriers haven't been built? What is uninsurable? In other words, which stage of the decision? Another key point, of course, we're talking here about Earth system physics. That's what climate change is. And that's an interesting challenge for human beings because we're used to a counterparty that will listen, will wait, will negotiate. Earth system physics doesn't. That means we are in a world where we're really looking at following the advice of the IPCC, and that list of things loss and damage should address is in fact straight from the IPCC AR6 report, because 1.5 degrees is the objective in the Paris Agreement, because it is broadly adaptable. It's not a world that looks like the world today, but once you start to go over 1.5 degrees, you are an increasingly unadaptable world. There is an escalating set of impacts. So the scale of the loss and damage discussion that we're having depends on how close you are to 1.5. Public and private money, last point. Of course, the insurance sector is already significantly, the private insurance sector, underpinned by public funds. In the UK, we have the Flood Re scheme, which keeps being extended. I think it's currently extended out to 2039. This essentially puts public money in to support the cost of private insurance to make it feasible. In the US, there is a national flood insurance program, which is in massive debt as a result of some of the recent crises. And those crises, some of the numbers that Kai has quoted are, of course, rather smaller than the scale of the crisis in Pakistan in 2022, just to take one example from the rest of the world. All of this, I think, adds us up to a situation where we are fundamentally, when we make any proposal in this space, talking about how we are going to take contributions from those who have the ability to pay and direct them, as Francesco said, to those who have need. I have no idea, I wish I did, how we do the politics of that. Because speaking as somebody who does a lot of European politics, that means talking about taking European taxpayers' money, perhaps via multilateral development banks, which makes it a little bit more obscure, but nonetheless taking European taxpayers' money in order to manage loss and damage, adaptation, and mitigation. It's a package elsewhere in the world. And of course, it's a package of four things because you need just transition as well. So let's keep that big context in mind when we talk about how to propose anything in the loss and damage space. It's certainly viewed as a package by the rest of the world. And one tiny example of why that matters, I'm learning a lot about India at the moment. And it's very difficult to have the European-Indian climate conversation because the Europeans keep wanting to talk about coal. And the response from India is, great, would you like to talk about oil? That is going to be part of the framing of any discussion about finance, of any discussion about loss and damage, of any discussion about the distribution of effort between the public and private sectors. So let's think about the layers of the onion here as we move forward with this proposal. Thanks.
Yeah, well, maybe as Francesco earlier said, and in the earlier panel also discussed the lesson learned from the COVID crisis, to see what's in that. And then maybe that can drive our thinking of how to solve global crisis and how to bring different sources together and learn what the mistake was from COVID. But maybe that could be one, and maybe also what you're saying about and talking about the European platform, that Europe is a little bit of a front runner, or do we think that Europe can play a role here to open doors for a new type of discussion, including the fossil fuel industry? I understand that this is a politically difficult issue, but it's a part of the same problem. So if we go to India, what do we, Vida, Dhawan, what's your feeling of what India can contribute and your position, and you're looking into the energy transition.
That's right.
As a part of this. What do you want to see?
Yeah, lots have been said, so I won't repeat what in terms of that the money is inadequate and that too whatever has been committed is actually not on the table. So most of the times we say, where is the money? It's not there. It's actually, and then is who should be the recipient? It is not very easy to say what has been lost and by whom. Because if you look at the entire ecosystem, whether it's loss of biodiversity, and very good example was mentioned about corals, coral reef. So then it is that what we have lost in the past, we simply cannot put it on a piece of paper in black and white. So who receives what? It becomes a very big question. Now let's also look into, like when we are talking of melting of glaciers, it is not an activity which is caused by one country. It's the overall global temperature increase which is resulting in melting of glaciers, and the kind of damage it is causing, it is first of all flash floods. And even today, there are so many people, it's becoming so common, and villages and villages, they get washed away. Who is losing it? The second is development of the country itself. Like you might have heard some time back, about a year back, Jyotimat, which is a place in Uttarakhand. And of course, we are not blaming anyone, but was it the construction of a tunnel, whether it was development, or as such, the houses, they started developing cracks, and government's immediate reaction was that people should be displaced from that region. The compensation those families received, that was not even 10% of the cost of construction if they construct a new house elsewhere. We also look at the development, because I'll cite few examples, like again in Uttarakhand, initially communities are very happy once they see a lot of hotels coming up and so on, because they see that there are going to be livelihood opportunities. But being an eco-sensitive region, they are actually going to suffer because of that. Now again, going back to the issue of glaciers, because what we are facing today, we say it's flash floods, but tomorrow we are going to be falling short of irrigation water. And it's actually going to have implications on geopolitics, because whether it is water going, the rivers which go from India to Pakistan or Bangladesh, then somewhere it will be that India is not giving us adequate water. So there are going to be political tensions associated with that as well. So it's a very, very complicated issue, and I'll put it this way, we don't have really solutions. Now the other question, should we in a way say that the petroleum industry, they should pay for it? It's in a way, we all are using fossil fuel with open eyes. No one is forcing us to use them. But what we are saying is they are someone who had made profits, and therefore they have surplus which can go in the overall development of the planet. Otherwise, we are using it the way we should, or to our needs, to fulfill our needs, and whatever price it is available, we still buy it. Energy transition in the long run is going to play a very important role. Like if I take case of India, we are blessed with plenty of sunshine. It's almost, you can say all the 365 days in a year there is sunshine in the country, adequate for solar energy production. And therefore the cost of solar energy in India perhaps is lower than that in many other countries. So till now, the disadvantage situation we had for manufacturing will be overcome by transiting to the renewable energy. And that again is clean. What one is also looking forward to, and apart from loss and damage fund, is the green or carbon credits. Because that's another way of that some of the countries, they have adequate trees, or one can look for nature-based solutions, and that is again where they will make somebody to take care of their own problems, which are perhaps increasing every passing day.
I do understand that what you say, that you are going into make more transformation proposal to reduce the emissions. That will also affect the loss and damage in the long term. And how you do that has a political implication, who's going to pay for the development. And, but you also mention the measurement and justice, and how do we have a transparent system for measure this type of damage and losses? The insurance industry have developed business proposals, so you must have a model of how you measure. Is it transparent? And what do you see? Can you contribute with models of a measurement system that could help governments to drive this development?
We do that all the time. The models, we have very sophisticated models that calculate loss, and that information is actually quite transparent. We don't, that's not hidden. But I like the point. The issue isn't the valuation of the loss. The issue is whose fault was it? And this, I think this is your point, right? Somebody is saying, well, yeah, this happened, but this wasn't because of climate change, or this wasn't because of, so then it becomes who's paying. So this is why I like the vision paper, because it's saying, just from a GDP standpoint, let the countries put a contribution in. Let a small portion of that make the community function, and then put the onus on the community to figure out how to leverage in more money. Then who cares whose fault it is? In the end, you're just trying to build up the benefit back to the community. So I think if you try and take away the blame element of this, I think we can make progress faster. But I honestly don't think it's the data, the provision of data, the transparency of that. We have some very great risk models that are going to show you exactly what's going to happen the next time a storm hits the coast of Florida. And we could calculate quite accurately the actual value of that damage. And so we could project that for the next 20 years. But then it needs somebody to step up and say, so what do we do with the money that we then don't pay out? How are we going to put that into some sort of fund to fund for the long-term infrastructure, or for the damage that's going to ensue, or to minimize it going forward?
What do you think about...
Are your models equally good for Uganda?
Sorry?
Your models for Florida, are they equally good for Uganda?
Absolutely equally as good for Uganda. But to the decarbonisation point, in the end, we're talking about loss and damage because we're not coming off fossil fuels fast enough. So keep up your activism. I absolutely encourage you to do it, because it'll make our job easier, because the overall cost to society will come down if we tackle climate change, right? So the problem we're facing is it's spiraling up. The cost to society is going up. So it's not the insurance company that's going to pay for this, it's society at large. So in the end, all we can do with our data and our models is show you where those greatest risk areas are and the implications for that community. And it's up to the community, in my view, to protect themselves, to figure out how to make the business case work. And we want to help them do that.
So, Francesco, before we end this discussion, what do you want to see as a next step to deliver some proposal for the conference?
Well, first of all, we will sort of debrief what we have been said, and we will elaborate a better proposal. But I think we need to be practical and to really go forward. The loss and damage was proposed the first time was probably COP4 or COP5, something like that, and we are now at COP29, and next year we will have COP30 in Rio de Janeiro, and we are actually Belém, sorry, and we are keep talking. We need to to experiment some solution. Let me say one very small thing. I was talking the first time about this proposal of ours on loss and damage with a guy called Al-Jaber, Sultan Al-Jaber. A few days after COP28, we happened to be both in some gathering with our friends from Al Jazeera in Doha, and I sort of mentioned to him this idea, no, of this sort of next generation planet, and he said to me, "Look, Francesco, the problem is not even the agreement, is the implementation and the overall institutional setting of something like COP, no." It's for him. He said to me, "I'm managing director of, by the way, a big oil company. It's called ADNOC plus Mazar, but he's a businessman, no? So he said to me, it's a complete mess, no, for somebody like me to try to be the president of COP for 3 weeks time. Now I need a big holidays." He was more exhausted than myself with the Dolomite conference. But he said to me, probably the even bigger problem is to reform the way conference of parties work. And this is another proposal of us. There is also a proposal on how to possibly reform conference of parties, which is probably even bolder, but we need some bold ideas. And also disagreement, so that we can move forward.
Maybe it's a question also to send to Brazil for COP30 to be ready and based on this discussion here, and to be delivered in a good way. But I could see that the private capital and the insurance sector seems to be well prepared to drive this development, and also we have activists who address the concrete issues related to climate actions, but a missing piece is the political leadership. Do we have that in place to take these questions on board for public discussion?
So just on something that was said is that when the public notices directly some of the events, I think it's a big change. And in the case of Brazil, I think it was mentioned this morning, we had a series now of floods and droughts and the Amazon River dry, and this is going to the press, to the media. I think that creates another level of sensibility of the urgency. So I think, horribly to say, but of course this is a positive element in the sense of mobilizing all these actors in this complex struggle, domestic struggle, not only international, domestic struggle. So I think this is a different moment. In the case of, despite all these talks about reform of COPs and so on, I think in the case of Latin America, I would say, it is a focal point for a lot of articulations. But the comment I was going to make is that in terms of who manages the design, the institution design of this process, and that I put that as a question because in Latin America we have a mobilization of the so-called Organization of the Amazon Treaty, OTCA, and that englobes all the countries that share the Amazon biome. And there's been some articulations in terms of bringing common proposals to COP, but also the biodiversity. So there has been a lot of talks because obviously, I mean, you cannot do that either alone, but also straight in some combination of countries. And in the case of Brazil, there is, and I'll bring that again to the table, there is a big dispute because there are several alternatives in terms of these institutions to handle that. I wouldn't know about the insurance companies, but definitely in terms of development banks. There are national development banks, there are the regional development banks. CAF, that's one that is with South American countries especially. There is the Inter-American Development Bank. They are all with a lot of investment in different areas. But there is also, in the case of Brazil, and I guess that India, there is also discussion about the banks from the BRICS banks. And I think in some of these areas, there is convergence, definitely, and I think that's important. But I just want to put that to the table, how to combine, because I think that some institutions, like for the Next Generation Europe, is the EU. It has some democratic legitimacy to do that. Therefore, it is up to about, but much more than, yeah. So that's my question. How do you see any regional partners for that? I mean, again, OTCA is one that's trying to articulate a common proposal for loss and damage too. I mean, so.
Well, I see that there's a lot of opportunity here to develop for further dialogues, but it's also a question of how do we think that we're going to solve the problem the losses and damage fund have with today's work? We have 700 million there. The question for you to answer before we end, will we raise a $580 billion US to 2030? Yes or no? Everyone.
No. I think that, again, it is a global issue.
Yes or no?
I would say yes, because I'm a positive person. But I'm saying that there's some local, starting with the local biomas, that perhaps
yes, sir?
Some advance can do.
Yes, sir? Yes or no?
The money exists if we want to.
That was a little bit skepticism in that answer. Yeah. And Vida?
Well, I'll say it's very difficult, but in a way, we have to take our baby steps. And it's not that if that money doesn't come and why it should only come from the certain sector. I'll put it this way, this amount of money is required, so either we generate ourselves or it comes as an aid, but the solution has to be found. The one thing I'll also like to mention, of course, insurance companies are ready, but the ability of those who really need it, they don't even have money to pay for insurance premium.
No.
And therefore, somewhere it is the international banks who have to play a very important role of not charging the countries which require on a higher rate of interest, but rather a subsidized rate so that they also are benefited.
So is it a yes or no? Is it a yes or no?
I'll say the answer to me is the entire money will never come.
Martin.
If we empower our communities
yes
to
no?
act, we'll make it. Yes.
Aida.
No. No, because the money has been, like we've had pledges and pledges, but the loss and damage keeps increasing. So the money can never be equal to the value that is being lost in different contexts of loss and damage. So definitely no, at least not now.
And Jing Wang? Yes or no?
No.
So it was clear answer from the young generation.
Can I add a no, but just 1 second. Next Generation EU, okay, for 1 second. I think it was Diba or somebody saying the Indian approach and, I don't know, the European approach to climate change is different. It's very true. It's very true also the Chinese and the American approach to climate change is different. But if we talk about Europe for a second, you may not know, but the approach to Europe of Germany and Italy is very different. You know, there is a religious difference, you know, in terms of, for instance, public debt. And yet, when we had the catastrophe, when we were all locked down, these differences were overcome. Just like differences were overcome at the time United Nations was established in 1947, or the Society of the League of Yes, after World War I. So I just think that we need to avoid a new catastrophe to take some real decision. We need to not wait that Dhaka or Shanghai go underwater to really do something. We need to act now.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, and for this, going from this panel, I must say that you created the platform with the wording "Next Generation Planet" that maybe will broaden this discussion up to include the ones who contribute to the damage and losses, and how to deal with the overall discussion about the system we have. And the name of the Next Generation Planet will help us to take step forward. So thank you for this, and I hope it contributes to the coming. Yeah.
Can I just say something before you close? I just would like to leave you with an information that on the year of 2022, at the end of the year, but it was the year of the war between Ukraine and Russia, Aramco declared unprecedented profit of 160 billion. We are subsidizing 6 trillion of US dollars per year for the fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm. And the EU spent over 300 billion euros on subsidizing gas prices for consumers and on recapitalizing companies hit by the energy price crisis in 22-23. That's in EU27 plus UK.
Maybe that we send this question for the further development to reach that political able opportunities, how to drive that dialogue to involve the fossil fuel industry. So
that's where responsibility and capital converge.
yeah, in the
Thank you for all the panelists. My question is to raise the issue about climate change litigations, because courts proved that they can attribute damage, and there is an ongoing developing attention about the climate change litigations, also against oil corporations. So when politicians are lacking, courts could step in due to activism of citizens. So what is the size of this climate change litigation today in the equation, and what could be in the future?
Who will take that question?
I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
But it's the same issue, is who ultimately owns up to paying. I get you can assess the damage, but in the end, who caused it? Do we share that between all those companies that spend 100 years burning fossil fuels based on GDP, or do you say, well, it wasn't me, or I'll pay So the issue is, in the end, you can litigate, but in the end, somebody has to pay, and it's tracking that down. It's always going to be difficult, but we are seeing increased cases of it, which I think is positive, because in the end, if a case is brought, it's because there's somebody they've identified that's going to potentially pay.
Well, and also one of the crucial issues is also how the financing system can change, and also we have new tools to work with as green bonds development and pension funds action, stakeholder activism. We have a lot of things in the toolbox, but the question is, do we have the leadership in place to use it? So, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We need to move to the last session with Stefano Granella.
We do a picture.
Yes.